Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Meditation and Spiritual Practice. And before we kind of launch in a little bit more to our weekly parsha and to the way that our Hasidic masters read it as how to engage in the present moment with more depth and awareness and presence. It's important to just lay out a little bit the Kabbalistic model of creation as put forth by Rabbi Isaac Luria, or the Ari in Sfat in the 16th century. And the Ari teaches he has a whole myth of creation, which is meant to not be understood as something that happened historically a long, long time ago, but in some ways is a myth, is a story, is an image that's trying to more metaphorically describe the moment to moment unfolding of creation that we experience every moment and every day. And what he says is that, is that in the beginning, there was just God, nothing else, just undifferentiated oneness. No people, no life, no this, no that, just pure presence, pure oneness. And then God, for whatever the mysterious reason, um, maybe it's a desire for relationship, for two-ness, goes ahead and withdraws God's presence from a center point, creating a vacuum where God is not. And in that moment where God is not, um, there is there is room for multiplicity, for something other than one. There's room for two, there's room for three, there's room for four, and that gets filled with the variation of creation. We might say that if we wanted to look at it as a linear story historically in time, which I said at the beginning this is not really about, but if we wanted to, we could say that's the Big Bang of this one tiny, teeny point of explosion, of bang, of universe expanding outwards with all of its multiplicity. That happened, that was able to happen in the vacuum was created by God withdrawing God's presence. But again, God's nature is infinite. So there cannot be a place where God is not. So God immediately infuses God's presence back into the multiplicity of creation, the trees and us and the birds and everything else, planets, galaxies, and all of a sudden, um, that that infusion is of infiniteness is too much for the finite multiple world that was created, and it shatters. It shatters completely. Um, and yet, within all of the shattered pieces and brokenness of this world is sparks of God's presence, is underlies all of it, everything. And that's a way to try to describe in this mythical, metaphorical way, how is it that we live in a world of brokenness, in a world of separation, in a world of division, and at the same time, whenever we open up and really look, God's presence is there, that oneness, that unifying presence is a part of everything. And so that is the background by which Rabbi Noam Elimelech of Lezhinsk, 19th century Hasidic rabbi and master, one of the brothers of the famous Reb Zusha. If you know the punchline of Reb Zusha going to heaven and saying, I didn't try to be more like Moses, I just tried to be more like Zusha, as a Hasidic story that's kind of teaching us about the holiness of being ourselves. That's the famous Reb Zusha. His brother, Elimelech of Lezhinsk, wrote a book called Noam Elimelech, a commentary on the Torah. And he views this opening line of this week's Parsha, Vayera, and God appeared by the oak tree of Mamre, as he was sitting, he being Abraham, at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. So, right, so God, Abraham is sitting at the entrance of his tent in the oaks within the oaks of Mamre. It's a place in the heat of the day, and God appeared. And so what Melech says is that he refers to this Kabbalistic myth of creation and says when God withdrew God's self from the center, where did God go? Where did God go? And he says that where God went was into the letters of the Torah. God went into the letters of the Torah. Now, remember, when we're talking about that, we're also assuming a very early midrash, first century midrash by the rabbis that said, God looked into the Torah to create the world. Or if we wanted to not make it a historical time, God looks into the Torah to create the world at every moment, which is in some way to say that Torah in this is not, or teaching is not just about the 5 books of Moses and what we have written, but Torah is the blueprint for creation, right? In the same way that the building that we're sitting in, the house, had to have a blueprint for design to create it, so too there is a vision, a purpose, a sense of pattern that connects all of life, a blueprint for every moment in which God is present and is intentional through each moment. And so that blueprint, where did God go? God went into the letters of the Torah. God's presence can be found in being able to understand the blueprint of creation. That's another way of saying that how do we understand the blueprint of creation? Well, it's through interpretation. It's through midrash. Whether we're looking at the text itself and trying to understand, just like Reb Elimelech did with this piece, that it's not just about Abraham sitting in his tent in some place long ago, but that really he's speaking about that this is about God's presence in every moment. And if we try to read and interpret the Torah like that, we have the opportunity to find God's presence. It also can be, as we look around at the events in our life, what's the interpretation that we bring to it? What is the pattern that we use to identify or connect why things are the way we are, why we are the way we are? And in a sense, I want to suggest, that in good accordance with the tradition of our rabbis, it's not a particular understanding, a particular interpretation in our own life for the events in our world that's going on around us that we just have to uncover. But instead, the opportunity, there are infinite number of interpretations of why things are the way they are, what's the pattern, and connect. And in what ways can we find interpretations? Can we view our lives in the world in a way that God is present? How can we invite and see God's presence in the letters, in the way that things open up? And it's not something that is an easy answer. It's a question that we hold on our hearts. Because in a sense, what he's saying here is that when it says God appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre, he says the word Mamre, it's not just a place name, but it refers to speech, like the word amar or le'amor. And so it's really saying is that the tree of speech of Mamre is the Torah, and its branches are mitzvot. And so what Abraham was doing sitting in his tent is he was interpreting the events of that moment in a way that allowed God to be present. And that was when God appeared. God appeared because Abraham was able to create a meaningful interpretation of what was happening in a way that allowed him to see God's presence. The other piece of that is that it says that this phrase, he was sitting at the opening of the tent, is connected to the fact that Abraham had great humility. That he that being at the entrance of the tent is symbolic of being at the entrance of holiness. And he was willing to be open to what was at the threshold of his tent and beyond. And that being open to holiness was a way that Rabbi Elimelech said was that openness was a quality of Abraham's humility. And so part of being able to draw interpretations of Torah and of the world in ways that invite God in, we need to be able to come to it with a humility. We need to be able to come to it with being able to say, oh, I may find a meaningful interpretation or something that clicks or connects for me, but I know that it's just one of many perspectives. And my perspective is not the ultimate. I come to it with a sense of humility, of sitting at the opening of my tent, the opening to other people, the opening to listen, to learn, to invite guests in, to invite other interpretations in. All of this is what Abraham brought to that moment. And the last thing that Reb Elimelech says is that he says that when he was sitting at the opening of his tent in the heat of the day, he said that that heat of the day implies that he was sitting in daylight. And the daylight was a way of, I don't exactly know how he connects this, but he says that Abraham had the attitude of a beginner. He was a beginner. And that's obviously connected to his humility, that he didn't have a sense that he knew it all. And we know that from the Midrash, Abraham taught. He would travel from place to place and he would invite people to come to his table and would share Torah with them and would bring them close to God. But I think it's very significant that even as we have Abraham, the vision of the rabbis, as a teacher or as a preacher or as somebody that seemed in some ways to have answers, what brought people to Abraham and what allowed him to have such meaningful interpretations that brought God into the picture was that he saw himself as a beginner. He saw himself as a beginner and he was open. So that's what we're going to practice this morning, is practice sitting in the opening of our tent in the heat of the day, in the oaks of Mamre, and be open to, with humility, to how to feel ourselves and our lives and our world in a way that invites God in. So find a comfortable position that you can sit in for a period of time. We'll start with a nigun, a melody, and then move into the silence. Yana nai 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 nai. Yai rai rai yai rai rai. Iri rai 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 yai rai rai. Ai rai rai yai rai rai. Yada rai 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 yai rai rai. Yana nai 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 nai. Yana nai 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 nai. Yana nai 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 nai. Yana nai 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 nai. So settle into your body, into your breath, bringing your attention to this moment, noticing where the air enters the nostrils or the mouth. Pay attention to the way the body expands to make room for the inhale as the air comes in. Notice that moment where the inhale reaches its maximum length and switches over to an exhale. And then as you follow the air out on the exhale, notice that moment where the exhale reaches its maximum length and switches over to an inhale. So just really make a decision to be present with each cycle of breath, knowing that everything happens right here, right now. That depth, presence, Torah is in this moment, in the movement of breath, in the space in between, in the unfolding of sensation in the body. Let yourself have room for it all. As you keep your attention on that movement of breath, you can also let your awareness expand to include the sensations in your body, the pressure of your bottom on the chair, the way the legs extend out of the hip sockets, culminating in the resting place of your feet and the contact of your feet on the floor, the distance between the bottom of your spine and the top of your head, the way the arms hang out of the shoulder sockets and the resting place of the hands. All is present in each moment of breath. And consider that we are sitting at the opening of our tents. That more than one Hasidic master teaches that Abraham sitting at the opening of his tent was sitting at the opening of holiness. He was sitting at the awareness of depth, that there is depth that goes beyond what he can perceive. Let our sitting at the opening of our tents be about being open to that which is beyond, even as we are fully present with what is unfolding moment by moment. It's about being totally open to be able to affirm and accept what we perceive, and at the same time to be open to a bigger picture, to be open to a picture where God is present, where each moment is filled with a vibrancy and an aliveness and a depth.